Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. We're on part 4 of our story and we're going to learn about Philip Joubert's account, how he'd been nursing a secret crush on Brooke Bordeaux for a very long time, and how their paths literally meet where, she literally knocks him over in the middle of the road in the middle of the night because she's drunk. And then the next morning, after the experience, it all seems to be so surreal, she's absolutely convinced it's a dream. So let's see where the story goes. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with the final part of the story tonight. I knew that Brooke Bordeaux was going to be at Fern's 28th birthday party that night, and I had decided to take my mother's salient advice. Tonight was the night that I would take the plunge. I would dive into the deep end and ask Brooke Bordeaux out, even if it meant I drowned in the process. Some risks were well worth taking. In truth, I couldn't believe Brooke had not been snapped up by a handsome young man a long time ago. But I think some men have been wary towards her over the years, as Brooke tends to wear an expression on her face that makes her look somewhat unapproachable. But I know underneath the starched veneer that woman has a marshmallow heart and so many endearing qualities that I have loved so much. Growing up, I observed what a nurturing and loving nature Brooke really had, which was one of the quintessential reasons I had fallen for her so hard at such a young age. It was at 8 years old, 6 of us kids happened to find a dying kitten lying in the middle of the road. It certainly looked as if someone had run over its back leg. My friends said, "Leave it be. Let nature take its course." They knew there was no hope for the little kitten. But Brooke snapped at us all, telling us that we were cold and unfeeling. She lovingly cradled the kitten to her chest, hurriedly got on her bike and cycled all the way to the local vet, who said the kitten wasn't going to make it, and it was the kindest thing to put it down. Brooke refused to give up on the kitten, and begged the vet to help the kitten, saying that she'd pay him with all her pocket money. The vet treated the kitten and amputated its back leg, and against all the odds the kitten recovered, and lived for 18 long years, and was very nimble on its 3 legs. Brooke adored the cat. She called it Grace, and from that moment on I decided I was in love with her. She had refused to give up on this kitten when everybody else had done so, even the vet. I decided privately to myself that one day when I was all grown up and big, I was going to ask Brooke Bordeaux to be my wife. I wanted someone to fight for me faithfully, like Brooke had fought for that little kitten. Someone with a steely grit, who will stand up for you even if the ship is sinking, and it seems like all hope is lost. That's the kind of woman I wanted to marry, and Brooke fitted the picture perfectly. I had decided that tonight was the night I was going to ask her out. I couldn't afford to sit back on my laurels any more and do nothing to address my feelings. I had taken my father to one side the previous evening to ask him what I should do about Brooke Bordeaux. For the first time in my life I confided in him that I had been in love with Brooke since I was 8 years old. At this, my father was more than a little stunned. "I've always been in love with her, Dad," I explained. "Mum was having a go at me yesterday afternoon, saying that I'm unable to commit to a woman. And she's right. I haven't been able to commit to anyone else, as ever since Brooke Bordeaux saved that dying little kitten in the middle of the road, when we were 8 years old. She never gave up on it, and I knew from that moment on she was the girl for me." "Good Lord, son, you're a slow mover. A snail might be faster than you are. You're telling me that you've been in love with this girl since you were 8 years old? I've never heard of anything like this before, but I guess there's a first time for everything." "Well, I've kept these feelings to myself, Dad. Love is not something you can rationalize or explain, is it? But I don't understand, son, why you've never asked the girl out. For goodness sake, what is wrong with you? Frankly, I'm surprised someone hasn't snapped her up already. She's an attractive woman who's got a lot going for her. I understand she's an exceptional first-grade teacher, who the headmaster described as one of a kind. So what are you waiting for? Ask the girl out, for God's sake. From what I can see, you haven't had a problem dating other women like Olivia. So why are you so reticent to ask Brooke out? You've known her for long enough. Yes, she's a delightful young lady. But why haven't you done anything about showing her how you truly feel? I was afraid, Dad, to ask her out. Like you were afraid to ask Mum out all those years ago. Remember, she was the one that approached you first, even though you had been besotted about her secretly for ages and ages. Mum believes if she hadn't taken the initiative to ask you out, nothing would have happened, and you might never have got married. By Jove, you're right. I'd forgotten about that, said my father, rubbing his moustache reflectively. I always fancied your mother, you know, but I could never pluck up the courage to ask her out. I was afraid she'd say no. So when she took the initiative to ask me out, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I'm sorry, son, it seems you've inherited my rather reticent genes, but you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone for once, if you want to make this lovely young lady part of your life. Between me and you, your mother's got ants in her pants. She's had them for the last few weeks or so, ever since you broke up with Olivia, for sure. What has she got ants in her pants about, Dad? Well, she's stressing out, isn't she? She's been in quite a state for a while, as I was saying, worrying that you're going to be single forever. She wants you to settle down, find a lovely young lady for yourself, and have plenty of grandbabies for her to fuss over. You know how soppy your mother is. Oh, that, she's already told me about that. She says I should have married Olivia, but that would have been dishonest, Dad, if I had feelings for someone else. Well, I wonder how well you're going to take it, son, if you watch Brooke Bordeaux walking down the aisle with another man on her arm, if you stand by and do nothing about your feelings. You need to address them, and you need to ask her out as soon as you possibly can. Get your act together, son. You're right, Dad. You remember Fern Redrose, don't you? Yes, I do. You hung around her and a few other local kids when you were a boy. What about her? Well, she's invited me to her 28th birthday party tonight, and Brooke will definitely be there. And come hell or high water, Dad, I'm going to ask her out. Good on you, son. I wish you the best. I'm sure that Brooke will be pleased to go out with you. Maybe she's been nursing a secret crush on you for all these years, but done nothing to address it. Stranger things have happened. I hope you're right, Dad. I really do. Well, you know what you need to do, son. When you get to that party, whatever the hell you do, don't you dare lose your nerve. You understand me? Don't leave that party without asking Brooke out, or you'll have me to deal with. I'm not going to let you blow this, son. I want the very best for you. And if you don't ask that girl out, I'll call her myself and ask her out on your behalf. And see if I don't. I won't lose my nerve, Dad. Not this time, I promise. When I arrived at Fern Redrose's farmhouse, the whole place was a bustling hive of activity, and Mrs. Redrose greeted me warmly, as did Fern, who threw her arms around me affectionately and welcomed me into her home. There was easily over 100 guests scattered liberally all over the Redrose extended property. My eyes skimmed the party, as if I was separating the cream from the milk. With my eyes, the cream on this occasion was most certainly Brooke Bordeaux. But where was she? For a moment my heart almost sank. I could see no sign or sight of her. Supposing she hadn't come to the party. I'd worked up myself into quite the frenzy, rehearsing the lines in my head of what I would say when I asked her out. And if she wasn't here tonight, that was going to be a setback for me for sure. It was then that I saw her. She looked utterly gorgeous. My whole body melted like butter on a corn cob. I could feel my heart thundering in my chest. My adrenaline spiked. Brooke was wearing a very flattering, fetching, streamlined, slinky black dress, with silvery glitter sprinkled all over the fabric. The dress hugged her in all the right places, and a slit on the side of her dress showed a tiny bit of leg, which was so much more provocative than if she'd been wearing something short and very revealing. I noticed her long dark hair had been prettily highlighted with auburn highlights that brought out the greenish haze colour of her eyes. She was not wearing much makeup, but in my opinion she looked like a goddess. I could see her nervously looking around at all the people at the party. She seemed somewhat on edge, as if she'd rather be anywhere else than at this party. I watched her helping herself to a simple glass of Coca-Cola, which looked pretty miserable and nondescript. She was having a few words with Fern, and then going over to the swing chair on the patio that overlooked the swimming pool, where the red rose cat Arthur was lying in a neat little bundle, and she was affectionately stroking the cat and talking to him gently while sipping her Coca-Cola. This was typical behaviour for Brooke Bordeaux. She adored animals of every kind. I knew this was my moment to strike, so I wasted no time and walked over to Brooke with my heart in my throat, because that's how nervous I was. "Hello, Brooke," I said with a warm, friendly smile on my face. "I can't say I'm surprised you've gravitated towards this chair, given what's on it," I teased. "I know you love cats. And Arthur, well, he's very affectionate, isn't he? I can see he loves the way you're scratching him under his chin like that. Popcorn's the more skittish of Fern's cats, as you well know. You probably won't see him for dust tonight, but if anyone can win him over, it would be you, Brooke."
"Thanks for the vote of confidence, Philip. You know me and cats. I can't help myself, can I? I can't believe I'm seeing you tonight. I'm so glad you came. You haven't changed very much. You look the same as I remembered you, only a little older, and wiser, I suspect."
Brooke's eyes lit up when she saw me. I didn't know whether they lit up because she was seeing a childhood friend of hers, or because she genuinely liked me in a romantic way, but I could only hope the latter might be the case. But one thing that was going for me was that she genuinely was delighted to see me.
"It's quite a while since I saw you last, Philip. I've heard you've been doing very well for yourself. You have your own business, I believe, and an apartment, so you're definitely going places. I'm very impressed. But then again, I always knew you'd make something of yourself, and I wasn't wrong about that."
"Well, yes, I do have my own apartment and a business, but I like being my own boss. The thought of having someone else telling me what to do doesn't float my boat exactly. I'm no good, you see, at being ordered around by people."
"I think I understand where you're coming from on that. As a school teacher, we have to report to the headmaster all the time, and sometimes we do have our disagreements about things, and how things should be done around the school. So I get why you like being in charge of your own business. Fern told me you were coming to the party tonight, and I was so pleased to hear that. It's rather like old times, everyone being together again, don't you think?"
"Well, I wouldn't have missed coming to this party, knowing you were here," I said rather boldly.
"How sweet of you to say, Philip,"
said Brooke, looking somewhat surprised by my compliment.
"I can't believe that Fern is 28, can you? I mean, she's 2 years away from being 30, and I'm in the same boat, I'm afraid, and so are you, Philip. It feels like only the other day we were all riding around this area together with our bicycles, having the time of our lives. We had so much fun back in the day. But where did the time get to? It's like our childhoods blew out in a flash of lightning. They were far too short, don't you think?"
"That's life for you," I said. "My grandfather's in his late 80s, you know. He says the very same thing. He says his body is more frail these days, but he feels as young and as bright and as vibrant as he was when he was 20 years old. And he also doesn't know where the time went to. He says it feels like only the other day that he was in his 20s.
Brooke sighed. "You know what I think? Life is far too short. A human lifespan should be at least 800 years, maybe even 1,000, perhaps even 2,000. It was that way, you know, before the flood of Noah. I read about it in the Bible. If you look at how long some of those biblical characters lived, it's crazy."
"Do you mind if I sit down next to you?" I asked rather gingerly.
"But of course,"
said Brooke, shifting up onto the edge of the swing chair to give me some space between her and Arthur. Arthur remained on her lap, purring away very contentedly, as all animals seem to gravitate towards Brooke. She had a natural magic around them.
"It's a fantastic party, don't you think?"
said Brooke.
Everyone appears to be having a great time, but I doubt I'll get into the swing of things. As I'm not drinking any alcohol tonight, I've got to watch myself in that regard.
Well, you're not missing out too much. And you're right, the party is fabulous, I said cheesily. But it's not as fabulous as you are, Brooke. You look great tonight. Very fetching in that dress you're wearing. It really becomes you.
I'm so glad you like it,
said Brooke, looking genuinely pleased by my gushing compliment. I was sure her cheeks were flushing bright pink. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was being so talkative, as over the years I had never had much to say to her, especially when I was in her company. But now you couldn't shut me up. As right now I was resolutely determined to win over this beautiful woman's heart. So finally, I'm glad to say, the stallion had broken out of his stable, and nothing was going to stop him with his endeavours.
Would you believe it, I was driving past this little boutique in town. About 5 weeks back, I think it was. I saw this fabulous dress on a mannequin in the window, the one I'm wearing now, of course. I decided I'd stop and try it on, just for a moment. But when I saw the price tag, I nearly fainted, because I knew I couldn't possibly afford to buy it. It cost an absolute fortune, you see. But I still decided to try it on. Silly me. And that was when I made a big mistake, because I could not leave without that dress. So yes, I did the unthinkable, I bought it, even though my mother thought I was being way too extravagant with my pitiful schoolteacher's salary. The truth is, I cannot afford to splash out on extravagances like this, so I really indulge myself. I still live with my parents, because I cannot afford to buy my own apartment like you. My mother was telling me that you don't go test driving a Rolls-Royce in a showroom if you can't afford to buy it. And in the same breath, for a dress, I shouldn't try it on if the price tag is too high. But you know what it's like? I just couldn't help myself. So yes, I was frivolously reckless. But we only live once, don't we?
Well, it's worth every penny that you spent on it, the dress I mean, because it looks fabulous on you.
Why, thank you, Philip. You really are showering me with compliments this evening. If you carry on this way, you're going to make me blush.
Do you remember that time, Brooke, when we discovered that half-dead kitten lying in the middle of the road? Someone had run over its back leg. We were all on our bicycles at the time, all 6 of us. The kitten looked to be dying. You were the one that insisted on taking it to the vet. Do you remember that? The cat lived another 18 years because of you, Brooke. You were horrified by the rest of us kids, giving up on the kitten so easily when you refused to do so.
Oh, I remember that very well. How could I forget? Even the vet thought the cat would die. He was giving up on her as well, and I couldn't believe it. But he decided to humour me. I think I went back home, you see, and I got the piggy bank. I had one of those piggy banks that you collect all the money in. And I think I had all pennies inside it. And I brought it to the vet's and just gave it to him. And I said that this was all the money I had saved up, and please would he operate on the kitten. He said I should keep my money and that he would operate on the kitten and amputate the back leg, but he couldn't guarantee anything. And he felt that the long-term prognosis was not good and that the little kitten would probably die. But it turned out that cat lived for 18 long years, and I adopted him as my own. That's why I called her Grace, because it was Grace that saved her, wasn't it?
This was the moment for me to tell Brooke how it was after that incident with the kitten that I had developed a huge secret crush on her. But that was when annoyingly Fern Redrose came rushing forward with a glass of punch in her hands, which she presented to Brooke. So the moment had been cruelly stolen.
You can't drink Coca-Cola all night, Brooke. That's being a party pooper, she teased. Have something a little bit more exotic, will you? This is the best punch you've ever tasted. It's got pineapple, passion fruit, coconut, and you name it in it. I made it myself, and it's amazing. It's very thoughtful of you, it really is, Fern, but you know me, I can't drink any alcohol,
said Brooke stiffly, waving her hand away.
You know, I told you, I don't want to drink alcohol any more. Don't worry about that, Brooke. I made this especially for you. It's non-alcoholic punch. There isn't any alcohol in it. But are you sure?
Asked Brooke doubtfully.
You made non-alcoholic punch especially for me. But of course I did. You're one of my best friends. I can't have you drinking Coke all evening, can I, Brooke?
Brooke took the punch and took a sip.
Oh, my goodness, it's delicious, she admitted. You can really taste the pineapple and passion fruit. I love it. You better be careful. I might drink the whole lot. That's the whole idea, said Fern.
Once Fern had left Brooke with her first glass of punch, we both sat for a long time on that swing chair with Arthur, talking about everything we could think of. But the opportunity to tell Brooke how I felt about her had been lost. It was after 3 glasses of punch that I realized that Brooke was becoming inebriated, so telling her about my feelings would likely be forgotten in the morning. The moment had been lost. I realized that Fern had deliberately been spiking Brooke's drinks, so I went off to have words with her. I was extremely annoyed with Fern's underhanded tactics, especially as Brooke had not wanted to consume any alcohol that evening. So what Fern had done was grossly unfair and very inappropriate.
What the hell do you think you're doing, Fern? I know what's going on here. I'm not stupid. Brooke asked you specifically for no alcohol tonight, but you've been plying her with alcohol in that punch. Why would you do such a thing? She's giggling madly and is extremely inebriated. Arthur, your cat, was happily sitting on her lap a while ago, but even he is freaked out by her, because she's got all giggly. She's now looking for your other cat, Popcorn, but she can barely stand up straight. Her eyes have gone all glassy. She's very disorientated and confused.
Fern flushed with embarrassment.
It's just you know what she's like. She's so uptight all the time, so uncomfortable. Just look what she was like when she first arrived at the party. I didn't want her to be like this all evening. I wanted her to let go of her inhibitions, to have a great time. And when Brooke has a little to drink, she does relax. And over the last year or so, she's been so tense and uptight. I thought sneaking a bit of alcohol into her punch wouldn't do her any harm at all.
I don't know what you thought you were doing, Fern. You don't do something like this to your best friend. If Brooke didn't want to drink, you should have respected that. How much alcohol did you give her exactly? Because she's slurring her words, and she's not in a good way.
Oh, I guess I overdid it, Fern admitted. I just wanted my best friend to have fun, that's all. Whereabouts is she?
We could see Brooke tumbling into the house, calling out Popcorn's name. She bent under tables and looked in the corners of the rooms for Popcorn, and her pursuit of the cat seemed relentless. The Red Roses had 2 cats, Popcorn and Arthur, both that I knew very well. Popcorn was under the dining-room table, that was spread out with delicious array of food. The oversized, very porky cat was possibly hanging around in the hope that he might get some titbits from very kind people. Brooke got onto her hands and knees and started proposing to the cat, as she talked to him under the table. I knew she was so drunk, and I remember Mrs. Redrose looking extremely annoyed by this. She took her daughter very discreetly to one side, and asked her why Brooke was legless. Even though it was Fern's party, it would seem she was in the doghouse with her mother, because her mother knew exactly what she was up to. I could hear her mother scolding Fern for spiking Brooke's drink.
What the hell were you thinking? Exactly how much alcohol did you give her? Just look at her.
I can't believe you've done this, Fern.
It's just a bit of alcohol, Mum,
said Fern defensively. But her mother wasn't buying it. I mean, by the looks of Brooke, she had drunk a ton of the stuff. I stayed by her side all evening, while she was engaged in this drunken stupor. That was not her fault. At one point she started stroking the couch and telling it to be a good girl, and many people found this rather amusing. I did not. I spoke to Mrs. Redrose when Brooke began to fall asleep on the swing chair. Even in her drunken state I found her to be extremely beautiful. Mrs. Redrose told me that Brooke would stay overnight at their house, as she was so wasted, and it seemed like a great idea to me. I agreed to carry her to the spare bedroom, with Mrs. Redrose at my side, and together we tucked her into bed in all her clothes. We didn't even bother to remove her shoes. I would have driven her home myself, had I come to the party by car, but I'd walked here because I knew I was going to drink. Little did I know that my walk home that night would be quite an eventful experience, that I would be unlikely to ever forget. I had not drunk much that evening. Instead, I had spent most of the evening by Brook's side. Finally, Fern did take me to one side and have it out with me.
I know you've always had a crush on Brooke. Don't deny it, Philip. I know it. And tonight it was even more clear than usual. You really like her, don't you?
Is it that obvious?
Of course it's obvious. If you want a word of advice, Philip, tell Brooke how you feel about her when she's sober. I know she likes you. She always has.
She told you that?
Some things you don't have to be told. Some things you just know.
Fern told me.
So yes, she does like you.
When I left the Red Rose party, there was definitely a skip in my step. Fern believed that Brooke had always liked me, and that was music to my ears. I decided I would give Brooke a day or so to sober up after the party, and then I would pop around to her house and invite her out on our first date. I figured texting her would be a bit on the lame side. I was listening to music on my Bluetooth earphones as I walked down the country lanes that were fringed by tall, lofty trees on every side. For this was a rural area swaddled by woods, and most of the properties were pretty rustic. It was a tenebrific night. The moonlight was not desperately obliging. It appeared to be obscured by some cloud cover. I had regularly taken energetic walks in this part of the world before, at the dead of night, and it had never bothered me in the past. I wasn't feeling remotely apprehensive about walking back to my parents' house at this time of night. The walk was both invigorating, and the music I was listening to was enjoyable. I possibly shouldn't have been walking in the middle of this sequestered country road like this, but I didn't believe for a second that anybody else would be out at this late hour, nor would anybody be driving down the road at this time. So imagine my shock when I was just knocked over. I felt a sharp pain in the front of my left leg. My body appeared to collapse in the middle of the road. Everything happened fast at the speed of light. I looked down on myself and discovered I was covered in blood. And that was when I realized I must have been hit by a car. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Seeing myself covered in blood was absolutely terrifying. My leg was throbbing, and I suddenly felt incredibly weak, which may have been brought on by the shock. I guess an artery on my leg was splitting open, and had been severed in some way, and was beginning to bleed out. I knew if I didn't stop the bleeding, I was pretty much dead. So I began holding my hand tightly over the open wound to stop the blood from gushing out. All of a sudden I saw an obscure figure getting out of a car and staggering towards me with an ungainly stride. I realized it was Brooke. She was drunk and swaying like a tree, but when she bent down to see me lying on the road covered in blood, she took one look at me, and her eyes widened with terror. When she saw me, she said, "Philip! Oh my God! Oh my God, what have I done?" She made this very unfortunate gagging sound, and I heard her rushing off to a nearby bush and violently throwing up the contents of her stomach. I guess seeing me lying in the middle of the road covered in blood, and realizing that she was responsible for running me over, was making her hurl. Time stood still. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, almost losing awareness of my surroundings. I do remember lying in the middle of the road, my clothes spattered in blood, my heart pounding, my hand desperately trying to stop the blood flow. Everything was so dreamlike, so very surreal. And that was when the Bigfoot appeared. There were two of them. I thought I was imagining things at first. I was losing so much blood. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. The male Bigfoot appeared enormous. He ripped off the shirt from my back, and that I felt because I could feel the cold air on my body. He tore it into shreds and wound bandages around my leg to stop the bleeding. He knew instinctively what he was doing, and he was efficient. I realized these Bigfoots were trying to save my life. They were chatting together. The male's voice boomed rather loudly. The female's voice was soothing and comforting. They were talking to each other backwards and forwards. and once they had covered my leg in the bandages, the male Bigfoot looked straight into my eyes, and then everything went completely black. Looking back, I think he might have hypnotized me in some way, as after looking into those dark eyes of his, it was like the lights went out for me. I do not remember anything after that, apart from drifting between consciousness and unconsciousness. Instinctively, I was well aware that I was being looked after. I could sense I was lying on something very soft and downy. It felt like a comfortable mattress made out of grass and feathers, and it smelt incredibly woodsy. I recall the accident in flashbacks. I remembered Brooke's car being involved, and that she'd knocked me over onto the road. I felt woozy, as if caught under an anaesthetic that I couldn't break through, because it was all but a foggy blur to me. It was as if I was held to ransom, under a grogginess that I simply could not overcome, try as I might. I could feel someone gently patting my face, with what felt like a damp cloth. They were talking to me soothingly in a gentle chatter, as if trying to offer me comfort. The cloth appeared to be dabbing me on my body, especially on the leg area, where the skin had been broken open, so the application caused my skin to sting. The large hand patted me gently, as if to calm me down and reassure me. Someone would lift me up into a seated position and throw something really bitter down my throat that made me want to gag. It was so disgusting. But there were other times that I was given something that tasted rather of honey on my mouth, and it melted down the back of my throat and was very soothing. I was to learn later that I spent several days with these Bigfoots in what appeared to be a cave of some kind. As to where it was, I cannot tell you, and my time spent with them is all but an ambiguous blur. I suspect it's meant to be that way, almost as if I'm not supposed to remember what exactly happened. While I was convalescing in the cave, it was comforting to feel that I was not alone. I felt extremely safe in the presence of these Bigfoots, for I knew they meant me no harm. I would hear them talking together, along with the crackling sound of a fire, and I could smell the wood smoke, and all that was reassuring. I remember one day just waking up feeling so much better, and a lot stronger, and I sat up on this large bed made of grass, feathers and leaves, and in truth it was more comfortable than my expensive king-size bed at home, with its plush mattress. I could see I was in a large cave, and that was when I realized where I was. It had been made into a cosy den that was covered with animal skins. There were tree stumps around the caves that were being used for sitting, and I noticed some woven grass baskets. I looked up to see a male and female Bigfoot standing side by side, looking at me tenderly. The first thing I observed was that although they were so intimidating, in both size and stature, that their eyes were incredibly kind. The Bigfoots never said anything to me at all, but they did look at me and communicate with me telepathically. The female Bigfoot said to me, "You are better now. We'll take you back to where we found you on that road. You very nearly died, but it wasn't your time to go, so we had to intervene. We had to stop the bleeding in your leg, or you would have bled out. But your leg is much better now. It's healed over, and you will live." The male Bigfoot then said to me, "I need you to look into my eyes. I need to put you in a trance, so that you won't remember your time spent with us. Please look directly into my eyes." I did just that, and then all I remember is that everything suddenly went black. And then when I came to, I realized I was on the same road where I'd had the accidents. I discovered to my surprise that I was wearing no shirt and no pants, just a pair of boxer shorts. The Bigfoots must have disposed of my blood-soaked clothes, but luckily it wasn't cold. I discovered I still had the bandages the Bigfoots had made on my leg, and I inspected them, and the Bigfoots were right. The wound had healed over and had closed. I could see some kind of green ointment had been applied to the gash. I wouldn't even need stitches. I do believe the Bigfoot stopped me from bleeding out. I learnt that I'd been away for 3 days, but I doubt anyone would have registered I was missing, not even my parents. I had my own apartment, you see, and I worked for myself, so the alarm would never have been raised that I'd been missing, unless Brooke Bordeaux had told anyone that she had run into me while driving the car. Indeed, if she had witnessed the Bigfoots whisking me away from the scene of the accident, she'd probably have believed it was the effects of the drink talking that had teased her imagination, and not realised that what she'd witnessed had indeed been real. I knew by the time I reached my parents' home, I'd get something to eat straight away, have a shower, and get dressed, and then I'd go and see Brooke Bordeaux at once. My close call with death meant telling her how I felt about her. Simply could not wait a moment longer. I didn't blame her for running me over that night. None of this was her fault. It was all down to Fern Redrose. She was the one that plied Brooke with alcohol. Brooke's account. After Fern Redrose's party, my mother and father were none too pleased with me. I guess I can't blame them for that. My mother continued to harp on about what a drunken mess I was when I arrived home that night. She was paranoid at the best of times, but my driving home drunk, something that she found impossible to forgive. What I didn't share with my mother, of course, was about the haunting nightmare that kept harassing me, and it was all about Philip Joubert. I do recall him in the early part of the evening at Fern Redrose's party, coming over to talk to me. That had been a pleasant surprise for me, as over the course of my childhood I'd secretly taken quite a shine to Philip Joubert, and I really, really liked him. He was the handsome boy that never really said very much, but that evening he'd been surprisingly talkative. He'd sat next to me on the swing chair overlooking the swimming pool, telling me how fabulous I looked. I'd never known him to be so complimentary. Later, the evening becomes a blur to me. I'm ashamed to say that I do not recall my drive home that night from Fern Redrose's party, but I kept having a nightmare where I'd knocked Philip Joubert down in my car. I'd actually killed him, and he was covered in blood, and then there were a couple of Bigfoots on the scene that stood by his side, and the male Bigfoot had thrown him over his shoulder and just literally glided away. I refused to entertain this nightmare because it was so graphic and the visions horrific. I reminded myself that the gypsy I'd met at the fair had told me that I must be very careful, as I'd have an accident on the road and potentially kill someone. The image of Philip Joubert lying on the road flashed into my head again and again, and it was so bad that I was beginning to wonder if it could potentially be true. 3 days had gone by, and I knew I had to go and see if Philip Joubert was all right, to satisfy myself that none of this had actually happened. Imagine my surprise when he rocked up at my front doorstep and invited me out for a drink. It was over drinks that he told me what had happened that night. I knew his story about the Bigfoots was true, because that was the nightmare that had been haunting me. And they had obviously intervened to help him. And as a result, Philip was alive. And I was the one that could potentially have killed him had the Bigfoots not intervened. So the gypsy's prognostications had been absolutely right. It was over drinks that Philip Joubert confessed to me that he had always had a crush on me and been in love with me since I was 8 years old. I admitted I felt exactly the same way about him. So 3 days later, he got down on his knees and proposed to me, and I said yes. That was 7 years ago. We are now happily married with 2 little girls. So Philip's mother's dream of being a grandmother one day was fulfilled. But every day I'm reminded that this life I am having now was given to me by 2 Bigfoots, because if it weren't for their intervention, Philip wouldn't be here. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.